Welcome to Michael Chaskalson. Michael is the founder of Mindfulness Works Limited and Professor of Practice Adjunct at Health and Executive Education. Based on more than 40 years of personal practice of mindfulness and related disciplines, Michael now shares his insight and research with audience worldwide, and we are so lucky to have him. He has also been a successful social entrepreneur, founding a fair trade company that came over an annual sales of £10 million and 200 employees. His current research interests are team mindfulness and also quiet eco-leadership, and he is currently writing a book whose working title is Mindfulness and the New Spirituality, a guide to waking up in complex times. Definitely needed. But it's not your first book. He has written 2 other and co-authored 2 more. So a warm welcome.
Thank you very much.
Mike.
Thank you. And thank you all for staying. It would have been more awkward to give this talk to an empty room. Thank you for your presence here. So I was pondering when I saw the speaker lineup for this conference what I could possibly say that might add anything useful to the talks that have already been given, and it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. So I hope that what I bring to the party may just add a tiny little bit of extra something to what you've learned and heard and what we've all shared so far in the last few days. So we'll begin with that. I mean, no doubt many of you will be familiar with this image. It's peer-reviewed publications largely into the outcomes of mindfulness training over the last wee while. When I started practicing myself back in 1974, there was no such evidence. There really wasn't. We hadn't a clue, what this stuff was doing. We knew it was doing us good. There was strong first-person evidence, but nothing in the public domain. In those days, you had to go to a Buddhist center, sit uncomfortably cross-legged on a floor in a drafty, incense-filled room in a hired hall somewhere. And what I learned there turned my life upside down, and I decided that that's what I was going to do with my life. So I spent the rest of my life pretty much committed to the practice, living in urban meditation centers, rural retreat centers, pretty much full-time engaged in the practice of meditation, studying Buddhism, etc., and going on retreats, doing long retreats, all this sort of thing. I had this foray into entrepreneurship around here where I set up that fair trade company with some colleagues, which gave me some sense of the stressors involved in setting up a cash-strapped startup. I didn't enjoy it. I left. Gave my shareholding to the trust, the foundation, and went on to do the mindfulness, meditation, Dharma stuff, as you could say. Around about here, they just published the outcomes of a couple of large-scale randomized control trials into the outcomes of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for relapsing depression. That was published by one of the publishers there, a man who became a close friend of mine in due course, John Teasdale. And they needed to train clinicians in our National Health Service to deliver these interventions. And so they set up a master's program at Bangor University in Wales, obscurely, to look into this and to begin to train clinicians. So I leapt at that because I wanted to make a change. I went to Bangor, joined the masters, was the first graduate. I am, folks, the world's first master of mindfulness. Whatever else happens, they'll never take that from me. And then I was teaching clinicians in our National Health Service. I taught on the program for several years. And then I started to train executive coaches in mindfulness skills. Nancy, who spoke earlier, is one of the early graduates of my Mindfulness for Coaches courses. And that then led me back into organizational work, which was wonderful. Because most of our lives are at work, if you want to change the world, and I always have wanted to somehow change the world, then affecting the world of work seems to me to be a reasonable place to start. Seems like a reasonable thing to be doing with one's time. And so I've been doing that, and increasingly coming to work with, I guess you might say, senior business leaders, and more recently, increasingly, at business schools. So at one of the schools I work at, Ashridge Executive Education, we have a contract to deliver what we call the Future Leaders Scheme to aspiring leaders in our civil service in the UK. So these are people who aspire to join the very, very, very top ranks of the civil service. They're already at a very high level in the civil service, running teams, having several hundred people reporting to them in teams very often, but they want to move up. And we deliver a training over several years, which hopefully helps them to, equips them with the skills needed. Hopefully. We get them in cohorts of 30, and I teach a module on mindful leadership as they come through. I ask people at the start of each cohort, who has a current mindfulness practice, and about a third of the room will put up their hands. How many of you have explored mindfulness? You've downloaded an app, you've read a book, you've been to classes, you've tried something out, and more than a third of the rest of them will put up their hands. How many of you have had no exposure to mindfulness at all so far? Hardly any. 2 or 3 people in the room are still fresh to this. So when I first started to teach this stuff back here, that was there was nobody in the room would have put it. 1 person, 2 people in the room might have had some kind of a practice, but they'd have kept it fairly quiet. So things have changed. Things have really changed, and that's a good thing, a really good thing. It comes with a significant downside. A pack of mindful bath salts. So I took this photograph in a shop in a popular street in London, and no matter come back. No matter that these have got added CBD oil and they come from the Himalayas. Soaking in a bath of these salts isn't going to increase the volume of the prefrontal or reduce activation in the amygdala after an emotional stimulus, or increase wiring between the prefrontal and the amygdala, or increase left prefrontal activation, reduce right prefrontal activation, or etc., etc. You all know the story. It's not going to do that. And people don't know this. By and large, people don't know this. The term mindfulness has moved out into the culture very widely, and it's widely taken up, and it's associated with soothing, calming, getting rid of your thoughts, stopping your mind, emptying your mind, etc., etc., etc. And of course, we in this room know that it isn't. But we have an uphill task to try to get the point across. It's an uphill task. Here's a conversation when I taught public courses more frequently. This is a conversation I had. Michael, I can't do this mindfulness stuff. Why can't you do it? Because I can't stop my thoughts. Oh yeah, it's not about stopping your thoughts. It's about coming into a new relationship with what's happening in your mind. Oh yeah, you said that. Yeah, but I can't do it. Why can't you do it? Because I can't stop my thoughts. No. It's not about etc., etc., etc. And then we just go around that circle. And a big part of any mindfulness teacher's task, as I'm sure many of you folks will know, is kind of wrestling people somehow, by whatever means you can find, into a willingness to pay attention to what's happening in their minds in a friendly way. To just sit with their own minds in a friendlier sort of way, rather than being in a fight with the mind all the time. It's about, So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to look at their minds rather than just through their minds. And that is, it's a huge ask. It's a huge ask. Because for most people, as we'll know, when they turn the lens through 180 degrees and look at their minds rather than just through their minds, what they find disturbs them. It's not comfortable. It's so busy in there, so disjointed, so fractured, so fractious, so unruly. To face into that can feel so uncomfortable. And there's a huge unwillingness on many people's part just to sit with what they initially find when they turn the lens through 180 degrees. I don't want to go there, I don't want to do this. It's so much easier just to pay attention out there. That's simple, I can do that. So this is what we're up against, folks, and actually that's a fraction of what we're up against. That's not what we're up against. You know, in fact, mindful bath salts, I'm kind of a fan, sort of, in as much as anything that helps people to calm and soothe can't be a bad thing. Yeah, if this helps people to calm and soothe, there's a huge need for that in the culture. So let's not fight too much with this. There are other targets that we need to bear in mind, but it does mislead. Okay, so here's something that I do with the executives I work with, and I'm not going to ask you to do it because in this room it wouldn't work as an exercise. So I ask people to please stay standing if they wait at least 5 minutes after waking up before checking their devices. Stay standing. So that gets about a quarter of the room down. You rarely or never check messages on your phone during family dinner. And again, more of the room sit. When on conference calls, you rarely do other work at the same time. And by now the room is on their chairs. It really is. The amount of sleep you need for at least 10 of the last 14 days. Everyone's now smiling wryly. Research at the school where I work tells us that executives in the UK at least are currently getting 6.5 hours sleep on average. Many of them are going to work so sleep deprived that it's the equivalent of having had a glass of wine for breakfast. You work fewer than 50 hours a week. Now, this is not Norway I'm doing this, right? This is the UK. So, and the time that we've got to take into account is the time people spend on their commutes doing that little cheeky Saturday afternoon slot that they've put aside to do 2 hours of clearing their in-tray, as if clearing your in-tray was productive work. Yeah, written. You receive fewer than 120 emails a day. That most people laugh. And you think you've paid attention while I've been speaking more than 40% of the time. And we know from Killingsworth and Gilbert that actually, and by the way, that Killingsworth and Gilbert research was conducted some years ago. I'm sure that the figure now is more dramatic than that. I'm sure that's the case. So this is what we're up against. By now, of course, everyone's just sort of looking like, yes, that's my life. That is my life. So we're all busy, tired, distracted, and overloaded. And in these conditions of being busy, tired, distracted, and overloaded, people are being asked to make decisions that affect other people's lives, produce great output at work, lead well, etc., etc. It's ridiculous. We've created a dysfunctional system within which we're asked to carry out our tasks, and really, it don't work. So that's where we find ourselves, and I suggest mindfulness training may help. And here, I really want to register an acknowledgement of Ron Purser's critique. Ron Purser has come up with the idea of mindfulness, or borrowed it, and made a career out of talking about it. And he's severely critical of the endeavor that many of us in this room may be engaged in. And I think we need to listen very carefully to what he has to say. In particular, he draws attention to the fact that we're really, in a certain sense, trying to put sticking plasters on dysfunctional systems. We're many of us teaching people embedded in systems that harm them, and being asked to help them to become more resilient in the face of the challenges that their daily lives subject them to. I think that's something that we have to answer as a critique. Are we also helping people to become aware of the systemic circumstances in which they lead their lives, because these are important. And just helping people in organizations to do better in the face of all of this stuff, in some ways almost seems unfair. And we'll come back to that in a moment or two. We'll come back to that. So we need to listen to Ron Purser and his critique, I think, and we need to begin to address it. And some of what I hope to share here may at least be the beginning of something, maybe, where we can begin to look at some of the things that Ron draws our attention to, however rudely. So, we talk about mindfulness as the awareness that comes from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. I don't need to go through all of this, but I would ordinarily. This is the bit where I believe the action really happens. What Kabat-Zinn and colleagues call the non-judgmental attitude of mindfulness. I talk about the allowing dimension of mindfulness. Allowing, letting what is the case be the case. Letting what's here be what's here. Rather than this constant, I wish it were somehow other than this. If only I hadn't done that X weeks ago, everything would be okay. If only, that person wasn't on my team, everything would be okay. If only that person wasn't my boss, everything would be okay. If only, in my case, they hadn't voted as they did 3.5 years ago, everything would be okay. But, we are where we are. It is like this. It is like this. So this non-judgmental dimension of mindfulness is ruthlessly reality-oriented. It is like this. Here we actually are. It is exactly like this now. If you can allow what is the case to be the case, then you have choice. Then you can step forward into the future of, well, it's like this, now what? If it can't be like this, if it shouldn't be like this, if they oughtn't to have done, I'm stuck in this place of aversion or craving. Yeah? When I can allow it simply to be like this, then I can move. Point one. Point two, the question is, if I can move, where do I move? And the second aspect of the allowing dimension of mindfulness is that we'll look for the best. What would be best? What would be best for me? What would be best for others? What would be best for the situation? What would be best now? What would be the best thing to do? What would be the kindest? What would be the most appropriate? What would be best now? So this in my view, is where the action happens, really. Yes, it's great to learn to work the attentional muscle more effectively. I think that's really wonderful. But the attitudinal dimension of this is really powerful. If you can really land that with executives, this allowing attitude and this kindly attitude, kindly towards myself, kindly towards others, kindly towards the situation, and reality-oriented. This is not fluffy, folks. It is like this. Then we've got someone. Okay. So you'll all have seen versions of this, I guess. For me, this is an illustration of the findings of Norman Farb and his colleagues. That was published, I think, in 2009. Is that right? The paper on the two different sets of neural networks that produce experience, that we're either experiencing the consequences of experiential networks, present moment experience, or we're experiencing the consequences of narrative networks, the stories we tell. This is where our egotism lives. Our egos are constructed out of the stories that we tell, and our anxieties, and wishes and desires. And this is non-egoic, you could say, simple present moment experiencing. Right here, right now, just this. So this guy's standing there, just seeing the view, feeling the breeze on his skin, He's not got any story going on, he's just experiencing. He's just there, having the experience. It's fab. Yeah? And this guy's ostensibly having the same experience, but it's very different. You know, he's can't stop thinking about stuff going on, you know, things that are, you know, wow, that's a wonderful view, what a wonderful view. Oh, great view, yeah, great view. Wish my partner was here. Gosh, she'd really love this view. Ah, she'd really love, yeah, nice view. Yeah, should be, oh, she'd really love this. She'd love, I should take a picture, I should stick it up on Instagram. Great, where's my phone? I've left my phone in the car, it's okay, the phone's in the car. Great view, car keys. No, oh, it's okay. And, you know, meanwhile there's problems on his desk playing out, problems in the family playing out, bits of a box set that he watched 3 nights ago playing out, songs from the 1990s when he was growing up. They're all in there too. So he may as well not be there, you know. And what he's doing is creating and recreating his sense of himself. These are powerful egoic processes at work. And to move from here to here is not rocket science at all. It's really simple. It's just moving attention to present moment experiencing. Simple as anything. Unfortunately, for various reasons, for deep habitual reasons, the attention really lands here. You know, it tends to slide away. And for many of us, it needs a bit of training to really anchor the attention in the present moment. Yeah. But so this is what we're working with. Everything good so far, folks? Yeah, cool. Where do we go next? So this guy's doing his mindfulness practice on a train. Whoops, thank you. He's doing the vanilla standard mindfulness practice of following his breath. And I see this now increasingly in the UK on trains. People do their mindfulness practice, which is a wonderful thing. This is a very luxurious mindfulness practice. I mean, you've not got someone over here on this show, someone that you. It's. But so we did some research at the business school where I work, looking at the outcomes of 8 weeks of a mindful leader training program on senior business leaders, self-described. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but a lot of them told us they did practice on the train, on their commute, which is great. But what he's doing is following his breath. And you know, like everyone else, he starts out thinking that he should keep his attention there, but his attention goes on a journey. Everyone's attention goes on a journey. It's just what happens. You set out to follow the breath or pay attention to anything, and your attention doesn't stay there. It's 2 breaths, 3 breaths, then the mind wanders. The thought pump gets going. One thought leads to another thought. He's lost in thought, just lost. And then this magical thing happens. And I don't think that anybody has yet given a reasonable account of what this magical thing is, where it comes from, but it happens. He has a moment of meta-awareness. He sees what he's up to. Oh yeah, I'm thinking, I meant to be meditating. And in that moment, because he sees what he's up to, it's really easy to bring his attention back. So he brings it back, whoop, he's back with the breath, he's with the breath for 1 breath, 2 breaths, thought wanders by, he starts to think, one thought leads to another thought, leads to another thought, he's lost in thought, and then another magical moment of meta-awareness. And these moments of meta-awareness just happen over and over and over again. And you know, what I really struggle on the programs that I teach to get people to understand, because I don't have long with them, is that that's the business. I tell them that learning to pay attention to your breath is an uninteresting skill as a leader. You know, it's not a great leadership quality to be able consistently to attend to your breath. But to understand your mind, to see what's going on in your own mind, to see what you're up to from moment to moment. Now that's powerful. So in these moments of meta-awareness, we see what we're up to. Oh yeah, I'm thinking, I meant to be meditating. You see what you're up to. And in that moment, you step back a little bit from being lost in thinking to being aware that you are thinking. You see what you're up to, and that's the point. That's the point. Doing this, we gradually build the resources of being able to see what we're up to more frequently. Yeah? We get to see ourselves about to say something unhelpful when our kid won't brush his teeth. Yeah? And we see what we're up to and think, hang on, is there a wiser way of going about this? So learning to see what you're up to is what this is all about. We call that meta-awareness. The other thing that's going on is this is all being conducted with an attitude of allowing. We're not beating ourselves up for the fact that the mind has wandered. We see what we're up to and gently, kindly return attention to the breath. We see what we're up to and gently, kindly, we're building this allowing attitude. Yeah, that's what my mind's like. That's what I do. That's okay. Treat it with a bit of kindness. And we're also developing an attitude of curiosity, interest in these inner processes. We're beginning to recognize what our inner processes are like. We're turning attention to those inner processes. So allowing, inquiry, and meta-awareness. Building neural resources, we call that AIM, learning to aim. Learning, allowing, inquiry, and meta-awareness. Those three are for me, what I think of as the key components of mindfulness training. Learning this attitude of allowing, which includes kindness and reality orientation, inquiry, which is curiosity, engagement, interest, and meta-awareness. Seeing what we're up to from moment to moment. So we talk about this as learning to aim, and then we learn how we can bring aim to bear on other parts of life. Can we bring this attitude of allowing, inquiry, and meta-awareness to bear on leadership challenges and so on? So we did this mindful leader study I talked about. We recruited a number of senior business leaders, divided them into 2 cohorts, gave one cohort 8 weeks of mindfulness training, measured the heck out of them before the first cohort did the training, after the first cohort did the training, before the second cohort, measured the first cohort against the second cohort, measured again after the second cohort had done their training. Also collected a ton of qualitative data, so we got them into small groups during the training to talk about what they were finding with their home practice, what they were finding with the course, how they were experiencing their leadership challenges. Recorded all of that stuff, transcribed 27 hours of data, applied 300 different codes to the transcripts, and this is what we found. They had an increase in allowing, inquiry, and meta-awareness. Frankly, that doesn't surprise me, because that's what I was really teaching. That opened up a space where they could respond rather than react, they told us. Increased their capacity for emotion regulation, for empathy, for focus, for adaptability, and for perspective taking. Perspective taking is the ability to try out different perspectives and also to recognize that other people have different perspectives than your own and to negotiate between perspectives. It's really vital. And that increased their overall resilience, their capacity to collaborate, and their capacity to be agile and make good decisions in conditions of complexity. Now that really happened if people did 10 minutes or more of formal mindfulness practice each day. If they did less than 10 minutes or didn't do any practice, they didn't get the same degree of change. They got some benefits from coming on the program itself, but they didn't get the same degree of change. 10 minutes in our data anyway seemed to be a break point. I'm not making any, you can overclaim on this. I'm guilty of that actually sometimes. But it does seem to be, and anecdotal evidence would tell us, and also other bits of research, that 10 minutes seems to be reasonable break point. Don't shoot me. So that's our mindful leader program. And it's great. So now we have opportunities to go into organizations on the back of some of this and train people to work more skillfully with their minds and their mental states, to look at their minds rather than just through their minds, to get a bit more adept and agile at working with what's going on in here. But, there's a big but, culture eats mindfulness for breakfast. It really does. It really does. And it's no use being able to regulate your emotions if you're being bullied or frequently overworked. Well, it's some use, but hey, this brings us back to the Ron-Persa critique. Organizations which don't look after their people, but bring in a mindfulness trainer to increase resilience so that we can fix this problem of lack of resilience, or absenteeism, or presenteeism, or lack of engagement, or our insurance bill, or whatever it is, our churn, or whatever it is, aren't paying attention, I think, to deeper systemic issues. And that's problematic. And we need to pay attention to the extent to which we're colluding in the process. So this is a big issue, and I don't have any easy answers. So there we are. It's no use being able to regulate your emotions if you're being bullied or frequently overworked, and maybe a small part of, some kind of response to this, maybe helping people to work more effectively in teams to increase levels of consciousness in the team. So we speak of team mindfulness. You could think of team mindfulness. Team mindfulness, folks, is not a bunch of people on a team practicing mindfulness together or separately. It's not about a team of people who have a mindfulness practice. Team mindfulness, as we think of it, and with some colleagues, we wrote a paper on this in Current Opinion in Psychology, for those who are interested. It's a Current Opinion in Psychology, 2019. Team mindfulness is the team, as it were, being self-aware. Yeah? So when a team becomes aware of itself, then you have a mindful team. So this is the team regularly, and with an allowing attitude, note the allowing attitude, reflecting on goals, processes, tasks, and dynamics and culture. What's it like in this team? What's it like to be here? How are we doing together? How are we being with each other? What's this team like? And when you can begin to do that, when the team can begin to reflect on itself in this sort of way, just from time to time, regularly, from time to time, then maybe some of the dysfunctional factors within the team, which will be present, may begin to be a little bit ironed out. A little bit ironed out. Maybe we start actually having healthier conversations together and stronger connections together and less dysfunction in what happens between us. And then if you can begin to infect that process in teams, you may begin to infect that in organizations. Maybe from there the organization can start to have in time, some kind of conversation about what's it like here, how are we doing things here. So this is theoretical so far, because we've not yet really implemented this on any scale yet. But that's the theory. What would it be like to get teams to have these kinds of conversations? Now, I take so team mindfulness is a quality of team experience that comes around when teams pay attention collectively to team objectives, tasks, roles, dynamics, and structures regularly, openly, and non-judgmentally. That's the paper in Current Opinion in Psychology, if you're interested in following that up. Okay. Can I move on? Slide okay? Anyone still needing to?
You're going to share this slide?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've sent them. Yeah. Okay. So, team mindfulness. This is you and Zelma Brun's paper in 2018 about team mindfulness. They suggest that, and that follows an intervention. Team mindfulness reduces relationship conflicts within teams, and when team mindfulness is low, there's a stronger relation between task conflict and relationship conflict, and there's a stronger relation between relationship conflict and social undermining. Let's just unpack that. When team mindfulness is low, look, task conflict's inevitable. We all have different ideas how we should go about do this thing. That's healthy. So task conflict is healthy, but where task conflict leads to relationship conflict, then we've got a problem. Those people think it should be like this, but we all think it should be like that, or you think it should be like this, and you are wrong because you're not a good person. That, crudely put, and there's a stronger relationship between relationship conflict and social undermining. In other words, people get bullied because they're different. Or because they spoke out of turn, or because they don't fit in here, or whatever. So team mindfulness seems to change this, which is good news. It changes the nature of the dynamics inside the teams. That's the theory. I recommend you and Zelma Brun's paper if you want to follow that up. So, now I do this with a heavy heart because although Google's very sexy and many of us love some of the stuff they're doing within their organization, what their organization is doing to the rest of us, I feel very, very conflicted about. I'm not a proponent of surveillance capitalism. I don't think their business model is a skillful one. I think their do no evil story went out of the window some time back. And I don't think they're the good guys, to be honest. Nonetheless, they're damn good at organizational design, and are damn good at looking at data. So they wanted to see which of their teams, why. Some of the teams at Google perform really, really well, and some of the teams don't. And it didn't matter what task the teams were charged with, and it didn't matter who was on the team. Some teams did really, really well. Some teams that you would expect to do really, really well didn't do really, really well. Why? And because they're great at crunching data, they just collected a ton of data and they crunched it. Yeah. So this is what they found. It matters less. What matters less is about who is on the team and more about how the team works together. Yeah? What really matters is how people work together. So these are the key components of high-performing teams at Google. They found that the top factor, which outranked the others by a factor, I think at least of 2 to 1, was psychological safety. The most important factor is psychological safety. People feel safe being on that team. People feel it's okay to be there. They can bring their whole self there. Then there's various other factors which I won't go into. You can look this up. It's easy to find. I'll give the URL for their report in a moment. But the most important factor by a long margin was psychological safety. Psychological safety is an individual's perception of the consequences of taking an interpersonal risk. This is from Amy Johnson? Amy Edmondson from Harvard. An individual's perception of the consequences of taking an interpersonal risk. They feel confident that no one on the team will embarrass or punish anyone else for admitting a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. Where psychological safety is higher, a whole bunch of good things happen. People are less likely to leave Google. They're more likely to harness the power of diverse ideas from their teammates. They brought in more revenue per head and were rated as effective twice as often by other Google executives. I like that one. You know, you just happen to be on a team that's psychologically safe and everyone thinks you're great. Fab, you can't lose. So It's powerful stuff. It's really, really powerful stuff. Psychological safety in the workplace is critically important. And yet so many teams and so many people find themselves working in contexts that are psychologically unsafe. I have no research on this, but I boldly assert that the majority of people working in large organizations find themselves working in situations which they think of as psychologically unsafe. And that's very bad for everyone's health, it's bad for productivity, it's bad for creativity and innovation. We need, as a society, people to feel psychologically safe so that we can harness the kinds of creativity and innovation needed to face the challenges that we all face together. It's vitally important. So team mindfulness interventions use mindfulness training to build aim, allowing inquiry and meta-awareness. So that's the first instance of a team mindfulness intervention as I would see it. We're only just beginning here to help people to understand the importance of allowing inquiry and meta-awareness through paying attention to their own minds in the first instance. Just developing those capacities in the first instance. And then using those ideas of aim, allowing inquiry and meta-awareness, to talk about how we do things here, how we listen to one another here, how we are with one another here. Can we allow each other to be each other? Can we allow that person to be that person? Can I be interested in what's happening in that person? Can I inquire more skillfully into why and how and so on? Can I allow, can I inquire, and can I sustain some awareness of what it's like to be here? We're not just engaged in tasks here, but there's a weather here, there's a climate, there's a dynamic between us all. Can I pay attention to that? Can I get interested in that climate? What can we do to make this climate a healthier climate? It's important to draw attention to process as well as content in team meetings, to understand how we do things, not just what we do. Most meetings in most organizations just get straight into content, focus solely on content, and come to a close and move on to another meeting where you focus solely on content. If you don't pay attention to process, then team climate is unaffected. You need to pay attention to process. And we need to educate leaders in the value of psychological safety. Now, psychological safety is not in a leader's gift. It's not down to the leader alone to enhance psychological safety in their teams, but they're a really, really important condition in the development of psychological safety. The way they are and the way they behave will be a vital condition in the presence or absence of psychological safety in a team. It's not enough for the leader to want it or to see the value of it, but it's an important beginning. It's a really important beginning. Okay, so before I conclude in 2 minutes' time, any questions on any of that? Any thoughts, objections, speculations? Sharon.
Something somebody told me once was that mindfulness changes the space between us.
Yes.
And I thought that's a really beautiful way.
Yes, lovely.
Especially on a team.
Yes, great, thank you. Lovely, great. Mindfulness changes the space between us. Yeah. Good. Okay. So thank you very much, folks. If you're interested in, our guided meditations are available for anyone who wants to use them. Help yourself. If you want to get in touch with me, that mindful leader research I spoke about has been published. It's on the web at HALT Research, a couple of books, blah, blah. Thank you very much, everyone.